It always starts for me with a pencil and a piece of paper.
And it's kind of fun. The older that I get, the less I care what other people think.
Oh,
So I've really
that's
gotten
the
out of that shell
blessing of getting older.
I'm going through the process and I'm laughing because it's painful.
Yes, it is.
And
And then there are days we say, why am I doing
You
this?
take all these pieces and put it together like a puzzle, because it really is, being an artist is puzzle work.
it
It
is.
really.
When I was 5, I lived with my mother and father and older brother John in our house on the grounds of a general hospital because my father was the medical director.
without it telling anyone, I also signed up for an advertising design class. At least I could draw, I told
So
myself.
for the majority of my childhood, especially during the summers, it was just me, my cats, and my imagination.
Bo undressed slowly and with keen precision, looking over his shoulder. The steam from the shower created protective cover, just enough where he could.
Okay, so we're going to start this podcast by introducing ourselves individually. And what we're going to talk about is our creative process. And so I'm going to start, and then Karen, and then Val, and then Pam. And that's how we're going to go. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we got into this business of being creatives. And for work, I'm a psychotherapist, and I've been, had a private practice for 30 plus years. And one of the things that I realize is that being a psychotherapist means that I hear people's stories all day long. And also I tell my own story, little bits at a time as I interact. But it has taught me one thing, which has helped me with the writing, is that with clients, I can't go on and on. If I get past 3 or 4 sentences about myself, they tend to look at their watch, or, because it's their time. So it's taught me how to use words economically, which is something that editors want us to do. So I started writing fiction. And I think I was trying to remember when I started, because it was a long time ago, but it was I remember 2008. I was on a vacation with my husband in Canada. And at that time, I was thinking up names for characters of my first book, which is titled Ancestors. And by the way, I now have written 5 books. They're a series, and I'm editing the 4th book. I'm still editing the 4th book. But the first 3 are up on Amazon, and I'm self-published. But it's been a long road. And one of the things that has been such a challenge, it took me a long time to realize how much I needed an editor. I thought, oh no, I can write my stories. I was already handing out my manuscript to people, and my friends, of course, said, oh, this is great. But what I didn't realize is, yes, it was, but it wasn't ready. And then I started the process of finding an editor, and I went through 3 until I found the 4th editor, and I had almost given up. And her name is Carol Burbank, and that's how I met Val here. And we have the same editor, and we're now in a writing group together. So writing a story, and I realized, there's a whole industry out there of people telling you how to write a novel. And a lot of it's good, but every once in a while, I come across something that really helps. And my favorite book on writing was written by Stephen King. And the name of the book is On Writing. And he said something that meant everything to me. He said, when you write, you're in a room all by yourself, and you're writing for yourself, and don't let anyone take over what you're doing, and don't let anyone read what you've done until you're ready. And that was so helpful to me, because when you're writing alone, it's very difficult to say, is this any good? And no, I don't know. You know, you go back and you read it, think, oh my God. You know, one day you write, you know, a couple pages and you start reading it the next day and it's, you know, it's not right. It's not good. So it's a process and it takes a lot of, you know, I don't know what word to use, but you've got to stick to it and you've got to believe in yourself. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but you do. You have to believe. I've got a story in me and it's going to come out and I can do this. But it's not an easy process. And there are a lot of people along the way who are ready and willing to tell you, forget it. This is never, that no one's ever going to care about this. And I've had people tell me that no one's going to care about your writing, but I did stick with it. So I'm going to kind of open it up to other people and see, you know, if you guys have experienced it, because they're kind of, the process can be agonizing and you can go for days without anything. And that spark, you think, oh my God, I've lost the spark. And then one day you write something and it, oh, that works. But again, I go back to, you've got to dive in and be willing to make a lot of mistakes and hear about it too, from someone you trust. So, you know, and that's why you have to read other writers, you have to read, you know, good writing, you have to read not so good writing, what sells, how not to make, you know, your everything you believe what your characters are all about. You have to realize your readers may not be interested in everything that you want to write about. So, you know, that's personal because our characters are personal to us, but we have to have, you know, some distance and objectivity. So, hey, Karen.
Well, I'm laughing because I just started a new project. So I'm going through the process and I'm laughing because it's painful.
Yes, it is.
And,
And then there are days we say, why am I doing this?
you know, and for me, since for me, it's a relationship with the client. And if we don't click, then it doesn't work. But I have to tell you, you know, by trade, I started in an ad. I'm a graphic designer. And after, right out of college, I got hired by an ad agency. And it was cars. And my account was the Nissan account. And I got teamed up with a writer, a copywriter. And that's how we came up with the you know, this is in the 90s when the brochures were coffee table books.
Right.
And so it was a 9-month project from the start of the design to, you know, to a printed copy. But I worked with a copywriter. And I had to because I'm not a wordsmith, but I remember when the Q45 came out, he said, okay, it's going to be on time. And I'm like, okay, time, 0 to 60. We're going to talk about the engine, you know, commuting days, you know, all these numbers. That's what it gave me to play with was numbers. So each chapter, you know, had a, you know, thing about time. So copywriters to me are priceless. You know, I can't do much without them. So now that I'm in Santa Barbara working on my own, I just happened to do one book. Some women walked into a small print shop here and wanted a book done on Christmas in Santa Barbara. They've been collecting stuff for years. So I helped them put that book together. Now this is before online publishing. So they had a garage full of books. I feel kind of bad about that. But anyway, that was my first book and I keep getting books. Sometimes I get a perfect manuscript, like from Jan, and sometimes I get a work in progress, you know. So I'm old school. So I've got books and then I've got other graphic design stuff. It always starts for me with a pencil and a piece of paper.
Yeah.
I just can't break that habit. Then you know, that could be a week or two of just
Yeah.
brewing this new concept, afraid to go to the computer. You know, this last book is, I'm working on it right now, and I've made it to the computer, and it's learning about this. This is on, they were trying to come up with a robot in the 80s. They did not have the artificial intelligence, to do it. And so it was a failed startup in the Silicon Valley. So it's called Lost in Silicon Valley is the name of the book. And it's kind of sad because startup after startup after startup kept failing. But I got to immerse myself in the world of 80s robots.
Yeah.
I love. I remember working on on Ghost, Jan's book Ghost, and we knew we wanted a bear on the cover. So I go down the rabbit hole of bears' claws, bears' teeth, what their nose looks like, how to draw it. I'm in a kind of a fantasy world most of the time, and I love it. So, that's what I do. I get a project, I let it brew. I'm afraid to go to the computer, but I'll doodle. And then I get up enough courage to get on the computer and see if it works. And I'll be darned if that's where the magic doesn't happen. And they're happy accident stuff on the computer.
That's the thing, is the happy accidents where you do give yourself the freedom just to play around, and then something comes out that is good.
Thrilled,
works.
And then I get in the zone where you can't stop me. And I'll look at the clock and it's midnight.
Right.
I know. So I'm pretty happy with I confess I'm old school. And I still start with a pencil. I'll tell you this little story about working at the agency, because there was a point when I got too old and I was paid too much because these younger kids were coming out of school. And when I would go on a photo shoot, I would show the client a pencil drawing. And I'd have the illustrator draw the car, the angle I wanted it, just black and white, just the angle I wanted in either a city or country, And so he would draw it and I say, here's the angle of the car. And then I'd have a folder on the locations, and here's where we're going. You're welcome to come. They usually wouldn't. But in the new the digital age, these kids, instead of a pencil drawing, were doing a Photoshop. They were putting a red car at kind of the red angle with either a country background or a city background. And it looked like a photo. And the client was always disappointed.
That's interesting, because I do think, being old school, I think, there's a lot of stuff about writing that's old school, as well. And I think sometimes we throw the baby out with the bathwater, that a lot is to be learned from, the writers who've been doing this for years. And a lot of them have written books about their process, and, like Stephen King. And I don't read horror particularly, but he's a really good writer. So yeah, and Val, you're nodding like this is all, this is what you do too.
No, yeah, I'm just shaking my head because everything that you're saying makes total sense. And I am Val Gale, and I am from the Midwest, born and raised. I'm an Army veteran. Disabled veteran, but not from being in the service, from a work accident I had 9 years ago. So I have a lot of different unique perspectives and views, on things as far as, being a veteran, being an amputee, and being able to pull from those experiences.
Yeah.
And also I write LGBTQ fiction. I like to do suspense and romance, but I think I'm starting to lean more towards romance. Maybe even smut a little bit. I don't know. Romance, smut.
Oh,
I mean,
good. You're good
you
at
know,
that.
so these guys have asked me to do, sex scenes for them, but some of my writer friends, and I'm like, sure, but
Fun.
Yeah.
so I identify as a trans man, and a lot of my books deal with what just like everybody else, you know, uh, when I was growing up at at a different time, in the 70s and 80s, well, more in the 80s as a teenager, and stuff, things were so closeted. I didn't, there wasn't verbiage for things that I felt or wanted to feel.
Yeah.
And so the very first thing that saved me was music. I always loved music. Music will always be my first love. It was a way to take words and feelings and give them value and meaning, in a world where I felt I didn't have a voice because I didn't feel the same way about things as other people that were around me. And so I, went into the military, then worked, a job in a factory for 15 years, had an accident, I kind of put away my dream of being a writer. I mean, I'd mess around and write here and there and do things. But my accident 9 years ago really catapulted me into, I had a chance at 47. I'm like, okay, a lot of people don't get to retire at 47. I
Yeah.
retired at 47,
Yeah.
and I said, what do I want to do? And I said, I want to be a writer. I want to go back to it full time. And so since then, I have I have a novel named Different on Amazon and Hunter. I'm a self-published author as well as Jan is. I was almost published by Wild Rose Press in 2022 for Hunter. I came really, really close, but they wanted me to take some things out of my book and not be true to myself. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So that's sometimes the price you pay. And, you have to have thick skin as a creative. Definitely as a writer, you have a lot of constructive criticism. You have people with different skill levels and ideas, and you all got to come together and see what works. Carol's my editor also, and as Jan's editor. And writing's not for the faint of heart. I used to
Mm.
I used to joke and say, "Oh, I'll just write a book," and then I realized what that really encompasses.
Once you've done it, oh
Once
my
I'm
God.
like, I can't believe you have to be very disciplined, very persistent, very introverted, but also extroverted. So I have, like I said, Different and Hunter on Amazon. It's LGBTQ romance and fiction, suspense thriller. I'm working on my third novel, Wild Dandelion. All of my characters are under the LGBTQ spectrum. I wanted to give inclusion and visibility to marginalized voices, whether lesbians, women, Black people, disabled people, physically and mentally, all of them have voices as well. And that's really why I do this. Now, some people have asked me, do you make a lot of money? And I laugh. No, I'd be starving. But that's not what it's about for me. Sure, I'd like to make money, but it's about message and inspiring and following the trailblazers before me, and then leaving a trailblaze behind me for the younger writers coming through, because I kind of have a middle perspective. I think that I have the old school perspective of writing and, what LGBTQ is all about and everything you go through in that experience as a young person and as an adult and in relationships and as a parent. But also a young at heart view of it as well. I'm kind of stuck in the middle. So, yeah.
I wanted to say to you, Val, I've read Hunter, and one of the things, getting to know you too, because you are, your voice is in that book, of course. You're so open to talking about this whole subject. And, for me, it's very refreshing because I live in the Bay Area, and a lot of people are fairly uptight. If you don't know the language, or if you misstep, you can, we're all very timid about asking, but you're very open about letting people ask you whatever they want. And your books are, as your passion comes through.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Jack, because that's what it's about for me. And I don't understand, I don't understand that whole People need, if somebody's being gracious enough with you, like you are, Jan, and this is how I feel about, I'm 55. So like I said, I feel like I'm in the middle of the young and the
Yeah.
older, I
Yeah.
feel, I didn't grow up with the language. I didn't have a voice for it. I didn't know anything about
Right.
that language. I would just go for a little sexual innuendo in a movie where, I think that woman was hitting on that other woman.
Yeah.
That's what I grew up with.
That's all you could
Yeah.
say.
That's all I could do. And so my imagination is where I went, that I wanted, and I think that a lot of younger people, unfortunately, I wish they would go back to the old school, going out in
Be
the
a little
woods and
more
playing.
willing.
Yeah, but I think if somebody's being gracious, I think the other person should be gracious as well. If somebody's not attacking you and they want to learn, then you should allow them the space to expand and explain to them, how you want to be addressed or how, what's acceptable to you, because we're all just human, and
Yeah.
it's not that big of a deal to address somebody the way they want to be addressed. That's just the way I see it. But you don't have to make a big deal out of if somebody doesn't understand the language, because
Well, and you can make mistakes, and it's
Yeah.
because it's new. It's a new language for those of us who most of our lives this
Right.
is absolutely wasn't even talked about when I was a kid. You didn't
Right.
even talk about
Right.
it, so.
You had the gay aunt or uncle that nobody invited over. I mean,
Right.
this is real
It
stuff
wasn't
that
talked about.
wasn't talked about. Or that one woman that was in prison that had a female lover. I can tell you all kinds of stuff that I'd be like, "Ooh," and I'd be like, listening, because I want to hear the tea. I want to hear what's going on. So I can write about it because, I felt as a young person and as a young adult that, our stories deserve to be told. Our love matters. Love is a human experience. I don't know how many arguments I have had with people about this. I'm like, you can't sit there and tell me love is a human experience.
Yeah.
How we do it, as long as we're not hurting anybody, is
Yeah.
our business. So how I love is going to be different than how you love, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But the one thing we should all have,
Well, that's what I love about you. It's all
humanity.
It
Humanity,
is,
right?
yeah. And that's terrific that you have that voice, Val, because it's so important, especially where you and I are in the Midwest. It's so, even now, kind of taboo.
Red state. I'm a red state.
Absolutely. I'm in Kansas. You can't get much redder than
No,
Iowa
you
and
can't.
Kansas. Nope. And
Yeah.
that's important. It's important for everybody to hear and to understand and to realize that just because they may not agree with your type of love, my type of love, anybody's type of love, doesn't make it wrong. And it doesn't,
Right.
it's not the end all
Okay.
if they don't agree with you.
Mhm.
And I think it's fantastic. And I think you're fantastic. And I think you're brave.
Thank you.
And I know I appreciate you, and I appreciate that voice that
Appreciate
you're
all of
giving
you.
for everybody.
Yeah.
It's
I just wanted
huge.
to tell, love, how I saw love as a young person, how it was scary. It was scary because I used to cry about it. I used to be like, I'm never going to find love. I'm never going to be able to love the way that I want to love because
You can't be
Yeah.
yourself.
I can't be myself. And so it was very scary,
Yeah.
and that's why I want to give these kids nowadays have so much more opportunity than you and I had, Pam, as
Mhm.
far as that goes. And I want to give something back, and I want to have it stay this way. We don't need to go back.
No, we don't at all. And you and I are the same age. So I
Yeah.
100% get where you're coming from on all of that. And yeah, I just
Mhm.
think it's important what you're doing. And I just want to recognize that it
Thank
is
you.
how important it is. And not only that, the way that I met Val was through a mutual friend. And it was when Val's accident occurred, because I'm a below knee amputee. And even though we're different types of amputees, I was able to say, hey, heads up, this isn't the end. This is,
That's
Right on.
another taboo subject too.
it
Amputees.
is.
Yes, it is.
It is.
Yeah,
Makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
it does. Because
Yeah.
I lost my leg in a car accident in my accident was in 94 and I lost my leg in 99. And then Val's accident, what year was that? 9 years?
2016.
Wow. I can't
Wow.
believe it's been that long.
I know.
Holy
And
cow.
mine was a work accident, everybody. So, I mean, usually those are trauma. Most
Yeah.
amputations are trauma, not all of them, but I mean, some of them are birth, but a lot of them are trauma related.
Oh,
A
yeah.
lot of them are. Yeah. Mine was for sure. But yeah, but no, and that's something else that is important is to I don't know if it's really being the face, but it is an important figure in the amputee community because there's so many that just aren't seen,
Yeah.
people. And
I'm
it's
sure. Yeah.
to have that representation is
Yeah.
hugely important.
Yeah, it
So
is.
kudos for that too.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
agree.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah. So Pam, let's hear from you about your creative process.
So my creative process is all over the place all the time. I have been an artist in some form or another since I was really young. I learned to draw from my dad. He was an artist as well, and he kind of taught me a little of what he knew, just kind of following him. I moved into painting, and sculpting is really, really where I landed. And I was there for a very long time. I sculpt mostly in polymer clays or two-part epoxies. I make
Mhm.
a lot of fantasy figures, like lots of Santa Clauses, lots of fairies, trolls, goblins, things like that. And that kind of pulls from another part of my life too, where I'm really big into the paranormal. And so that kind of goes hand in hand with that. But I
Oh
also
yeah.
quilt, and
Ah.
I do all kinds of wild things.
Mhm.
Kind of juxtaposition on some of those because
Yeah.
I'm also a librarian. That's really played into a lot of what I do because with the paranormal, it's got me interested in writing a book. Mine's more nonfiction at this time, though, and it's based on a lot of the cases that we've had. Um, I've been part of a paranormal group since 2012, and I researched on my own way before that. But we do a lot of cases and we go a lot of places. And now we've started having paracons. And I was just telling these guys beforehand that I'm exhausted because we had our annual paracon Saturday and it's a 40 speaker event. And it's a big deal. And it's a lot of fun. But so, yeah, I'm all over the place. I
And that's
podcast.
another area that is kind of, taboo too,
Oh,
because
big time. Yeah.
there are a lot of places where you begin talk about paranormal people. Oh, woo woo. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we get the woo woo all the time. Oh, so
Yeah, I'm sure you do. I
Yeah.
get it too, as a therapist. Oh, do you do all that woo woo talk? And well, yeah, of course. But naturally, didn't you know that people do talk about ghosts?
Mhm.
It's a big
Oh, yeah.
deal. But and they have the freedom to do it in a confidential place.
Mhm.
But again, it's interesting. We're all kind of talking about, areas that are not particularly mainstream. But to me, that's where my interest goes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun. The older that I get, the less I care what other people think.
Oh,
Mhm.
So I've really
that's
gotten
the
out of that shell of
blessing of getting older.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's wonderful. I just love it
Yes,
because
it is.
I could care less
Yeah.
at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I agree.
I have too many regrets from
Yeah.
caring
Yeah.
too much.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But
But I wanted to ask you, when did you first kind of get in interested in paranormal? Did you have an experience or?
I did. Yeah. So I've always been interested to start off with, and I'm not sure exactly when I got interested, but I know I was the kid that was in the library looking up all the paranormal books,
Uh-huh.
read them a million times, And then as I got older, I had some experiences of seeing some things and hearing some things, and that I just couldn't figure out. And then when I was in high school, um, there was me and three of my best friends. We worked at a place that they made newspapers, and so we worked the midnight shift, and we did the inserts of like the grocery ads and things. And so we would do that all night, and our lunch was about midnight. So we would get in the car and we would go through town, and out west of where I live is a place called the Sandhills, and there was always a party out there on the at late at night
Yeah.
in the summertime. So we would go see who was at the party. And we were going out, and my friend Shelly was driving, and I was in the passenger seat, and then our other two friends were behind us. And we come around this curve, and then there's a big bridge, and it straightens out beyond the bridge. Well, we're going over the bridge, and Shelly's headlights hit something, and it was right in the middle of the road, and it was on the lines of the road, and she slams on the brakes, and we're screaming, you know. And this thing looks at us, and it crouches down, and it jumped. And it
Wow.
jumped from the middle of the road completely over the edge and down to the river. And we went out later, just within the last few years, and the guys eyeballed it, and they're thinking it's about a 30-foot drop because it goes over the great big rocks,
Yeah.
the boulders, and
Wow.
things. And we called it the Peach Monster at the time because Shelly, she drove this little bitty Toyota Celica, and it had crappy lights, you know. So we think it was gray probably, but the way the lights hit it, it made it a peachy colored. But it looked right at us, and it jumped.
Yeah.
And so I went home and I drew a picture of this thing and told everybody. Of course, got completely made fun of, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're
Right.
like, oh, you know, because we were like, we think it was a Bigfoot, and they were like, you gave it human eyes. That had to be a person, you know, whatever. But I kept this drawing all these years. I still have it. And there's a gentleman named Dave Politis, and he writes the missing 411 things out in the national parks with all the missing people, and tries to, you know, just track these reports basically.
Yeah.
But he talked to the Hoopa tribe up in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
And they have a very close relationship with Bigfoot population.
Yeah, they do. They have
do.
Bigfoot stuff all over.
Yeah. And so he brought a
Yeah,
forensic
right.
artist up to the tribe, and he had them draw some photos off of that. And he had one on his website. Well, I happened to be on his website, and I just felt shock, and through my fingertips even, I was like, this thing had human eyes, but it looked
Yeah.
just like what I had drawn. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, all these years later, you know.
Yeah.
So I still have a picture of what I drew, and then the picture off of Dave
Yeah.
Plitty's website as a comparison. But
Yeah.
it was kind of, you know, felt good. You know, I got that little
Yeah.
justification that, yeah, you know.
You know,
Wow.
that area, you can see how, you know, Bigfoot would be, you know, sort of an integral part of it, because in those big trees, and especially when the fog comes in, it's very, I don't know,
Mysterious.
there's something about it. This is otherworldly.
Aerial, yeah.
It's really different, and
So
it's
cool.
not very well populated. People don't know to go there.
Mhm. Very
It-
cool.
but it's beautiful.
Well, that kind of got me started, and then you know,
Yeah,
had
I can
some,
see how.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just kind of been a snowball effect from there all my life. So
You know, I think I've worked a lot with artists over the years, you know, because I was very interested in working with dreams. I wrote my dissertation on my work with dreams, and found that very few therapists really worked with dreams, so which was a surprise to me. But the artists just took to it. Nobody ever questioned it. Oh yeah, a dream. Oh yeah, I had a dream the other day, and you know, they'd work with it. But people who weren't creatives, I don't dream, or what, how could that mean anything? You know, dreams don't mean anything. But artists don't have any problem with that.
isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it
there's-
is.
There's, and I can't think of the word of it, it's escaping me, but there's a percentage of the population that, like, when they read, they don't have the movie go through their head.
Right.
And how sad is that?
Oh,
How sad is that? I mean,
yeah.
no wonder there's people that don't like to read if all they see are the words on the page.
Well, yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, as writers, we do see the movie and then we write it down.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I wanted to ask any three of you guys, and I can let you know what I kind of do for the creative process as well. Like when you're trying to Jan, because you're a writer, and even Pam and Karen, your process, what are some things that you do to try to come up with setting or character, Jan? Or Pam, what kind of, do you try to have like a vision in your head of something that you're going to create with your
Yep.
sculpting, you know, and then Karen, you take all these pieces and put it together like a puzzle, because it really is, being an artist is puzzle work.
It
It
is.
really, really is. You can take a piece here from this part,
Oh,
Jan,
yeah, it is.
from the back of a story that you were doing, put it in front, move it here,
Right.
and it changes the whole trajectory of your story or what you're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of do you use, Jan, for like a creative process? What?
Well, I do. I see if it's outdoors, I see the landscape. I do. I see it. And if it's indoors, I see that too. You know, I mean, I walk around in the
Yeah.
house of the person, and then I just kind of follow the character in my mind, and then I write it down. Now, it doesn't always work, you know, as when you read
Right.
back and read it over, but that's where I start. And I also find that if I kind of don't surprise myself with what's coming next, the writing kind of falls
I
flat,
agree. I agree with you.
you know.
And you're really
And-
good. Anybody that read Ancestors, Jan, I read it. She's amazing. I put my review on Amazon.
I need to
You are really, really, your settings are just out of this world, how your description of settings. I can see that's something that I don't do. So I really respect that you really take the setting and
Yeah.
that's what you do.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks. Yeah.
For me, I do the character,
Yeah,
mine
you
is
do the
more-
character, but you do the settings too. I mean, I think, you know, again, I've never had any problem with seeing where your characters are. I see that.
That's good. I appreciate that because you do really, really well at that.
Okay, thanks.
I can tell mine later if you want to. Karen, what's your career? You said you
Karen,
start
I
with
think
the
you're
pen.
muted.
Oh, is Karen
Oh, no.
muted?
Back. Well, what did you ask me? Because
Your creative process, I think you said, and I love it because it's so old school. I'd be so lost starting with a pen and paper because I can't draw to save my life. So I think that's really, really cool that you start with just a pen and paper. So what gets your juices flowing to take an intangible thing and make it tangible?
well, that I gotta be in the. It's gotta be the right moment. I can't just turn it on. I
Okay.
kind of wait till maybe 6 or 7. See, I'm a night owl. I could work all night,
So my
but my phone can't be beeping or
Yeah.
the landline or I need that quiet time, I guess.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's hard sometimes to get
Oh,
in the
it's always hard because our lives are so filled with, you know, our phones and got to do this, got to do that. It's very difficult to get a whole day where you know, okay, no one's going to bother me, and I
yeah,
can just do my thing.
do I have a whole day?
Yeah.
And then, but
it-
it
yeah.
takes a lot to get me, after I've done my doodles, to get me on the computer. But once I'm there, it's hard to get me off because that's
Yeah.
when the magic happens. Now, I also do work in Photoshop. And, I never thought I'd be a Photoshop person, but magic happens there too.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, I know that because, you know, Karen and I have worked on my covers, and, you know, it's so much fun to work with you because it's playful. We just play around.
Yeah.
Oh, let's give him these claws. And we were doing the bear, and then, you know, can we get the cat in there too? And where are we going to put the cat? Just a little, you know.
We should put together like a show, like a slideshow.
We should. Of
Together.
where it started and where it came out to. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that's what puts the liveliness into it. You know, if the process was lively, it shows up in the design or in the writing. I don't care, you know, or I'm sure Pam with your character, I'd love to see them, you know, because if you do little,
Yeah.
I'm sure when you
I'm
see
gonna
them.
stop I'm gonna stop my camera for just a second, and
Okay,
I will
okay.
go grab one that's right behind me to show you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, do.
Or I have to say this because I'm 64 now, and I've been doing these kinds of projects for a while, and like I said, it's always painful in the beginning. Like, can I do this? I don't know. But when I was talking to Jan, I knew she had her books. You had at least 2.
Mhm.
When we started. But 10 years ago, I knew about ancestors because I read it.
Right. You read one of the early iterations. Yes.
So it's been brewing for a decade.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So when she formally asked her to help, it's like, bing, I knew exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
is an amazing cover, Karen. It
I
really
wanted
is.
to do these woodcut covers that we could weave in little detail thing in the kelp and in the, that's, and I think even then I'm like, okay, that's a good idea. And I'm like, no, Karen, this time you're going with that thing that popped into your head. So
Nice. Yeah.
at 64, I got a project. I was enlightened. I went for
Yeah.
it.
That's the way to do it.
Instead of second guessing her,
Yeah.
do you like this? I don't know. What do you think? I'm like, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And it worked.
I get what you mean when you say that it has to be the right moment sometimes, because you can sit and try to force something. It's not going to come until it's ready. It's
Yeah.
really
Right.
not.
It's just not.
It happens
Yeah.
to me all the time. Okay,
Yeah.
so I grabbed this piece if you guys want to see
Let's
it.
see it. I want to
Yes.
see it.
So let me give
Oh,
you a
goody.
little background to it. I love Labyrinth, the movie with you know who I'm talking about. And
David
door
Bowie.
knockers especially. And one of my friends was like, they love the door knockers and they would love to see something like it. And I was like, man, that would be a fun one to sculpt. So
Oh, wow.
I
Oh,
sculpted this,
God.
right?
Oh, I love it.
But then I was like, what would be
Fantastic.
behind that? What would look like behind?
Oh,
That's awesome.
I don't know if
Yes.
you can see.
that's just great. Oh, God. Those are wonderful.
Isn't that fun?
That
Uh-huh.
was a lot of
I
fun.
love it.
And the
I
crazy
love
part,
that it's fun.
it is, it's
Yeah.
whimsical.
Yeah.
I love whimsy. That's
Yeah,
what
I do
tried to
too.
do.
And I think it comes in all shapes and forms too,
It does.
because you
bet.
have to have it. That's the aliveness. That's just charming and funny and
Thank you.
got gravitas
Like
too.
a diorama.
Yeah, almost. Yeah. Yeah. And I love the
Cool.
fact that you see it from the front and you're like, oh, that's cool. But then when you see what's behind it, it's like, wow, they're fun.
Yeah, yeah,
This one
it
always
is.
makes me smile. This is one that I've held on to. I don't have much
Oh,
of my own
good.
left. And this is one
Yeah,
I've held
yeah.
on to.
Oh, I bet they sell quickly.
Yeah, I don't have a lot. I have this and I have a set of little old men that I sculpted. They're sitting on a park bench. And one of them, you can tell he's the goofy one. And the other guy's just like, the long suffering friend kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you got, yeah. And I've kept them too. They're down in my case over there. Well, you
I think that's
see, we're not, they're at the bottom.
Yeah.
In that black case.
Well, again, I often have talked about, humor is such an important part for me too. And I have I bring it into my books for my type of humor. It's a little bit dark, but I just have to have it, that something that actually makes me laugh, or when the characters, oh God, that guy's really funny, or she's an idiot, or whatever, because people, we're characters. We're all characters in this play, and so if we can't make fun of ourselves, I don't know what the point is.
That's, yeah, absolutely.
I think as artists, all of us, what we do, and I think what I hope we want people to understand how important artistry and other perceptions and bringing things that you can't see with your, with your naked eye, bringing these concepts out and bringing them to life. That's what everything, that we have has been brought forth by a creative, electricity. I mean, just these ideas that
Yeah,
people have in
absolutely.
their head and how important it is. And I think that as creatives, we live a lot in this third eye, and and for me, I want to evoke something. I want to inspire or evoke some kind of feeling you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
from somebody. I think it's important. And so that's what I try to do. And so I study people. You know, I'll watch how somebody walks. I will watch how somebody talks. I will watch how they're dressed. I will watch how their mood is on their face if they're trying to hide something that's different from what's on their face. You know, and another exercise that I do is I will take a character. I love movies and music. I'll take a
Mm.
character and I'll just sit there and I'll write a bunch of like, you know, I'll write like 30 adjectives of what this person's doing in this scene, what I see, you
Yeah.
know, and that's some of the things that I use to come up with characters and just song lyrics.
I mean, I have a question. Do you ever make a playlist for them? What would their playlist be?
That's a good idea. No, I
Mm.
haven't. That's actually a good idea because you do have to learn to let your character take on its own persona. You
You
have to
do.
let it get away from, and
You
Jan,
do.
you know that as a writer, you have to,
Yeah.
a lot of, as writers, we're in all of our characters. There's
We
a
are.
piece of me in
We
every
are.
character somewhere in there of how I've thought, how I've felt, how I've seen things. But you have to let them take on their own persona away from yours. So that makes them
Yes, that's what I
interesting.
mean. There has to be some objective distance, but they're intimate to us as well. I mean, you know,
Right.
they come out of us, but we have to be careful not to infuse too much of what we want them
Yeah.
to say and do. We have to, okay, now I've created the character of Morimi in Ancestors, and you know, what's she gonna do?
Right.
And
It has to be different from what you would do. Just like some of my characters, you know, are scum of the earth. They are
yeah.
sex
Oh
traffickers,
yeah, I've got some bad people.
pedophiles, drug users,
Mhm.
you know, I'm just saying alcohol, just very, very evil people. But then you have, why are they like that? Did
Yeah.
it happen to them? You know, the psychology of it too is
Oh,
interesting. And
sure.
some people are
Sure.
just assholes, straight up assholes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they
I
are.
mean,
Some are just
you know,
wired that way.
just wired that way, you know,
Yeah,
and
but the interesting characters are usually there's
they're
a
layered.
lot of, yeah, they're layered, and you know, and we know that as writers that you know, I did have a friend ask me, and I think it was Ghost, how did you come up with that? You know, the really bad guy in Ghost named Benjamin. He's a cult leader and he's awful. And she said, how did I said, I don't know. There are a lot of things about me you probably don't know about.
Yeah. I love watching serial killer stuff. I watch it all the time.
Oh, it's
I think it's
fascinating.
fascinating, you
Oh,
know,
there's a
Absolutely it
reason.
is.
There's a reason people are
fascinating,
it
you
is.
know.
Oh, I know.
I think the human condition is the most interesting thing that we have. And I
Yes.
love that as creatives, we pull into other dimensions and other portals, and there's other things out there.
Right.
Definitely, Pam, with you, I think of the whole wormhole
Oh,
paranormal
heck yeah.
thing, you know, portals and other things that it's because it would be arrogant for us to think we're the only intelligent.
Absolutely.
I
Well,
agree.
and we're
I
we're
agree.
big on that right now. We're big on
Yeah.
interdimensional
Yeah.
theories, interdimensional theory, you know, the multiverse theory. We're kind of pulling all that into a lot of our
It is
research.
fascinating. I bought a book on the multiverse that was it was way over my head, I have to say. It was a big thick book, so I gave it to my son who's interested, and I said, you read this. But I didn't realize, you know, there's a lot of really interesting stuff about the multiverse, and everything happens all at once. And yeah. And what was the name of that movie? Everything All at Once. It
Oh,
was
Yeah.
fascinating. I thought, you know, wow. How do we wrap our brains around that?
how
But I
do
will say the younger generation gets it better. In mine
Absolutely.
older, but the younger ones, oh yeah, of course. And I thought, yeah, okay. But it is fascinating. And
It
I
is a
think
fascinating
being interested in dreams brings that out.
Mhm.
Because it's a multiverse
I
universe.
think dreams are fascinating. I think that dreams really it deals with our subconscious and really how we
do.
feel
Mhm.
and we want to be, you know, and I believe in reincarnation. We could go on. I
Yeah.
believe in a lot of things.
Right.
You know, I think we have a creator. I don't know what kind of creator,
Yeah.
I don't either.
you know, but
Yeah, none of us knows, but
we don't know.
it's not an old man sitting on a cloud with a long beard.
No.
Know
No.
that.
No.
White man. No.
And don't you,
Right.
Val and Pam, don't you have UFO stories in the Midwest?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Where I live, we are on the 37th parallel, which is
Oh, yeah.
the UFO highway. So,
Nice.
right in
Right.
my area, we get tons of UFO reports. We get tons of cryptid and Bigfoot reports and tons of ghosts. So we're like
Yeah.
a little Bridgewater
God,
Triangle almost right where we're
a
at.
little. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, when I was writing my book entitled Ghosts, and it is about, the ghost is from the Civil War days, and he's a character in the book. So it's kind of the magical realism piece where you introduce a character who's from another dimension, but you don't explain it. It's just Zach, and he comes and goes and he talks. And but I had to do a lot of research on, ghosts, and the Civil War produced a ton. I mean, there's so many people hunting ghosts in Gettysburg that they cause a traffic jam at
Yeah.
night because everybody's out there with their flash bulbs, taking the ghost, but they're fascinating. And it's
They are.
very difficult not to believe a lot of it.
There's one of my best friends, she's about 10 years older than me, and she had bought this house. And I was helping her. This is before I lost my leg, and I was helping her when she bought it. I'm not kidding. There was trash up to your knees in this place, but it was a really beautiful old Victorian. And so we got it all cleaned out, and it was completely paneled, and
Yeah.
she wanted to wallpaper over it instead of just tearing out the paneling because she didn't know what was behind the paneling on those old plaster walls.
Right.
And so much stuff happened in that house. I mean, and I knew the family that had lived there before the family that trashed it. And so I went and said, hey, you guys screw up here. Can you tell me anything about it? And the son Ian was like, that place is haunted.
Mhm.
And we're like, okay, just wanted to, confirm that. Tell me
Yeah.
the stories before we tell you what's been happening. And he talked about seeing this little boy and girl in there all the time, and these different things, which Janie was seeing in there. She would hear, kids call grandma, and she'd be thinking it was her grandkids, and they weren't there, and yeah, things were happening. You would see people, lights would turn off and on, and
Yeah. It's so interesting to me, that how resistant people are to thinking this is quite possible. To me, it's more possible than not. But
Right.
again, it's kind of what we're talking about, taboo subjects. If you
Mhm.
start talking about ghosts like this, perfectly normal, people, oh my God, or you don't really believe that, do you? Say, yes, I do. And then of course I'm nuts.
right. Well, we went,
You
like in 2012 when we started our group. Mark, he's the other founding member with me. We put a call out in Caney, hey, if you're interested, come to a meeting. And we knew we were either going to get run out of town or we would
Right.
find some interest. 30 people showed up that first meeting, and we were
I'm
floored.
not surprised. I think again, people don't talk about it
Mhm.
so much. We still don't talk about, but I think that absolutely, you get people where they feel safe, and they have, where other people, are accepting of this, then you can talk about it.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
that's interesting because I love to talk about UFOs and ghosts, but my sister's boss said he was implanted, by an alien, and you got to roll your eyes. Oh, brother.
Well, I've heard those stories. And, as a psychotherapist, I'm
get
afraid
back.
it's delusional, and it all has the same theme. So I think some of them, they're, because they got abducted by aliens and etc. And then they got put back. And that one's, that whenever I hear that theme, I say, oh, okay.
it's a little,
Yeah.
some of it's hard to swallow, some of it really is. It's,
Yeah. Right.
and it's a fine line
But
because you don't
you're-
know.
But you're talking about the house. That to me is old
is-
houses have that. I
Absolutely.
think so.
And, the longer that we've done this, it's been 12 years now. And at first, nobody wanted to talk about pretty much anything with this. But now we're up to my little town. We have a Paracon. We bring in all these speakers, and
Which is
people will tell their stories now, but a lot of them want to
Yeah.
remain anonymous, which is fine. And we don't break that anonymity. But I think that's why we get the stories, is because we're willing to.
That's why. I'm sure it
yeah.
is. Yeah. People feel safe to
Yeah.
talk about it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we put a
Mhm.
face to it, but we allow them to tell it and be safe at the same time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think
we,
so.
I'm just, we just weekly we get more stories, and it's just, we're just like, trying to keep track of them all.
That's the thing. It's this is no, this means something that
Yes.
this many people have had this experience and know it's true.
Mhm.
So it seems like it's more true than not, but the resistance is strange. The fear of the unknown
Mhm.
is out there.
One of
Are you
my
coming back, Karen?
one of my teachers, she's actually one of my mother's best friends too. In 1976, she had a Trans Am, and she was driving back from a nearby town, and something came right above her. She had her T-tops off, and something came right above her and scared her. So she's going down the highway well over 120, and it was keeping pace with her, and it scared her
Wow.
so bad.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
she immediately told everybody the story, and she was immediately, she
Yeah.
was the crazy one.
That's crazy. Yeah.
But she still tells that story to this day, and she's absolutely firm that it happened. And I believe her. She didn't have any reason to
Yeah.
lie.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well,
That's,
when I was doing that research on ghosts, a lot of people were saying, I've never had any experience like this in my life, but I
There was that
heard,
one time.
yeah, yep,
Yeah.
right. Sorry, I interrupted you, Karen.
We get that a lot.
Oh. it was just, my mom grew up in Wyoming. And so there were lots of UFO stories. And one was two girls going to a dance in a barn, out in the middle of nowhere. And they saw these headlights coming towards them. And of course, it flew over. Now, that when you said you drew a picture of Bigfoot,
Yeah.
that reminded me, because one of the girls was able to draw a picture, and the other one was so freaked out she couldn't
She couldn't
Yeah.
do it.
Right.
talk about
Right.
it. It was
Right.
now that didn't happen.
I'll have to.
Yeah.
I have that. I'll send it to our chat so you guys can see it. The picture
Yeah,
from
do.
you and then the one from Dave Polides.
Yeah,
Pretty wild.
right,
But
right.
interesting stuff. Yay.
It is, and and it's all interwoven in this. Those of us who do live the creative process for whatever it is for each of us. We seem to this other dimension. It's almost like we're trying to get at that.
Mhm.
Somehow it's out there and trying to get at. How do you write about it? And our stories are full of it.
Where does that muse come
I-
from?
Yeah,
We are
but-
so lucky to be able to have a different perspective. Val, when
Yeah.
I heard you, this is what I do. I write down adjectives, or I've always wondered how writers do that. She leaned on her, palm and gazed at how do you do that?
Well,
It's just how I connect to,
Yeah.
it's just what I'm comfortable with
Yeah.
connecting. with
But you're
people.
always taking notes.
Yeah, I people watch a lot.
Yeah, and also what you do, Val, is you write. You don't try to get writerly, and I've had to unlearn. I was doing a little of that in the beginning, and fortunately, my husband of all people, because I think he's a writerly writer, said, "Oh no, you're trying to be writerly. Keep it simple, keep it direct, because those are the best
Oh.
writers."
Well, I get stuck in metaphor. I love metaphor. I think
Well,
metaphor
no,
is
your
just-
metaphors work. Yeah,
You.
they work.
I love metaphors. To
metaphors
me
too.
are a different, it's just,
Yeah,
it has a dichotomy to it that I just find fascinating.
Sure.
And I love the duality of things in life, period.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason that, duality and metaphor, I think there's some kind of some unspoken something that's there that we're supposed to know. And I think that's what each one of you guys do
Yeah.
as well. It's spiritual. It's a spiritual thing
Yeah, it is. It is.
for me.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I do it, because it's the
Absolutely.
closest. Yeah.
Absolutely. I believe that.
Yeah.
It's
Other-
spiritual.
And
Yep.
keep doing it.
Yeah.
You get scrutinized a lot being an artist. People are like, they're so judgmental. They're like, oh, yeah.
Well, yeah,
Mhm.
I was like, if I told somebody I was a graphic designer, or, oh, see, that's why I don't use the word artist. I'm a graphic designer by trade. Oh, you're an
Right.
artist. You must play with crayons and paint all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah,
a lot.
people think we're loosey-goosey when in fact artists are the most, disciplined people I know.
Mm-hmm.
But
You have to be.
again, we're often depicted as people who are kind of hanging out and just doing a little
In the
this and
clouds
that,
all the
and
time.
it's so not true. Yeah. So
I
Ready for the
admire
next thing. Yeah.
any author because I have, sat down and tried to put pen to paper, and it's hard.
Yeah,
it is
me
hard.
too.
So
I'm
hard.
a good writer.
Yeah.
I
I
bow
can
down.
write out a story, of the facts of what happened on a case and things like that. I can do that. But to create a story from nothing, that's hard. To create a whole world like you guys do, it's impressive.
Well, thank you. I find what you guys do, I could never. I remember I used to cry in 7th grade because they were like, okay, we got to draw this. I'm like, oh my God. And I would be crying because I can't draw. So I'd be drawing stick people, and my teacher would be like, like I told you, what do you want me to do? And that's not how it is funneled for me. That's
Right.
not how it comes out for me.
Yeah.
So mine is music and writing. That was the
Yeah.
two things that if I
Yeah.
could have been a musician or a writer, there you go. That's it.
So lucky. So lucky.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's
well,
like,
I looking at the time and
yes, you guys, so
we
much
managed
fun.
to do an hour.
Yes.
Well, I think this has been fun, and that's the important part.
It's been an excellent conversation. So going forward, what as a podcast, our focus is going to be, is it going to be more on interviewing specific creatives?
Well, I think any artist is a creative, don't you? I mean, I think, interesting people, again, as I say, artists are the most interesting people to me. In fact, if you're not an artist, you're not very interesting to me. It's just the way it is, because I can't talk to people who are in banking. I can't. I'm bad at that. Or something like that.
I think taking a
CPAs.
podcast and making it about exploring other creatives' own creative processes, I think it's fascinating. I think it's a great
Okay,
thing.
let's do that. Let's keep it at that.